Hey folks, I'm International Master Kostya Kavutsky, and today I'll be continuing my series for Lichess on the classics. So for today's video, I'm going to be focusing on the German chess master Adolf Anderssen, who was around in the mid-19th century and is generally regarded to be one of the greatest attacking players in the Romantic era. He's often included in the same sentence as Paul Morphy. For instance, the first official world champion, Wilhelm Steinitz, who played an extensive match against Anderssen, considered Anderssen and Morphy to be two of the most influential players in their generation. In addition to his fantastic attacking play, Anderssen was really known for his amazing and sparkling combinations, which I'd like to present a few in this video today. So the first game I'll be showing today is one of Anderssen's most famous wins against another strong player around that time, Lionel Kieseritzky, and this game was played in London, 1851. Here, this came from a King's Gambit. Black's last move was c6, attacking White's bishop, and Anderssen really comes up with an amazing concept here. He just completely ignores the attack to the bishop and decides to continue his play on the king side with the move g4. So this pawn cannot be captured, it's defended by the queen, and en passant is also quite bad because of Black's queen hanging on g5. But White's idea is actually not so much to take this knight on h5, but rather to secure the positioning of his strong knight on f5. And he's preparing the follow-up of h4. So here Black first plays knight f6, getting his knight away from the attack. Had Black taken on c takes b5, I'm pretty sure White would not have captured this knight, but would have instead followed with the move rook to g1, which is quite similar to what happens in the game. In the game, Black first retreats with knight f6, and White simply insists on the piece sacrifice with rook to g1, defending the g4 pawn and letting Black capture the bishop on b5. So Black goes c takes b5, and now White follows up with h4. Objectively, Black should not have accepted the piece. I think a move like h5 was stronger according to the engines here, and with this move, Black is just being able to fight for more counterplay. But okay, Black wanted to accept the piece, and now White goes for the attack. h4, h5, queen comes back to g5, and now queen comes out to f3. So White's idea here is again to just play for mainly development and playing for the initiative. His next move is going to be bishop takes f4, and in fact Black's queen is already running very short on squares. Black plays the move knight to g8. This is a very ugly looking move, but what to do? Black needed to get some space for the queen to get out of the way. White takes on f4, queen f6, knight c3, just continuing to develop, bishop to c5. Black is a piece up, but has almost no development to show for it, so objectively White is doing quite well here. And here Anderssen starts off on a combination that ends up going down in chess history. This game is known as the immortal game, mainly for the uniqueness and brilliancy of his combination, and that starts with the move knight d5. Though I should mention that objectively this combination was really not necessary. White had a lot of strong continuations here. I think d4 was maybe the simplest way to win the game. The point being that White is attacking the bishop, and if bishop takes d4, White can go knight d6 check. And after king d8, for example, bishop g5 is already winning material, as after queen takes g5, knight takes f7 picks up the queen. So I believe this was just a much simpler win, but Anderssen was known for his very flashy and spectacular style, so I can totally understand why he goes for knight d5 instead. Black takes the bait, goes queen takes b2, and now comes bishop d6. A really startling move. This is kind of the point of White's previous play. He's now setting up all kinds of mating nets against Black's king, with threats of knight c7 check and so on. Black decided to take this rook on g1 first. He could have also grabbed the rook on a1. And now objectively the combination I think wasn't 100% perfect because things could have gotten really messy, but it only takes an engine to figure this stuff out, and very difficult for a human player over the board. The best defense for Black was to first grab this rook on a1 with check, and then after king e2, if Black takes the rook on g1, for example, bishop takes g1, then after the fantastic move e5, this actually transposes to the game continuation, and we'll see what happens from here. The main point of this move is cutting off Black's queen from the defense of the g7 square and setting up knight takes g7 check with just winning attack. Instead of bishop takes g1, however, I think it was Steinitz who figured out that Black could play the move queen to b2, which is a much better defense, keeping an eye on the g7 pawn, but also threatening counterplay with queen takes c2. However, after king to d2, I think white's attacking chances here are still incredibly powerful. The king on e8 is in a lot of danger. The knight is coming soon either to d6 or to g7. Knight c7 check is a threat. White's queen is, of course, well placed. And I think the engine doesn't exactly understand white's attacking chances at first. It gives black an advantage due to the material, then even shows a draw at some point. But if you let the engine run long enough and analyze some of the lines, you'll see that white is winning. In fact, if you're curious in checking out some of my analysis, do make sure to check out the study linked below in the description to Lichess, where you can see my annotations to this game as well as all the other games we covered in the series, as well as some bonus games that didn't make it into the videos, but I think are still worth checking out. So the game continued with bishop takes g1, white played e5, queen takes a1 check, and king to e2. Now, according to Kasparov and my great predecessors, black actually resigned here, but the game is often given with the following continuation in mind, as I believe this was Anderssen's point. If black plays a move like knight a6, which seems like the most natural defensive move covering the c7 square, white wins in just really fantastic style after knight takes g7 check, king d8, queen f6, beautiful queen sacrifice. The point being knight takes f6, bishop e7 is now mate. So I think this was really the key combination that gave this name the nickname the Immortal Game, as people were obviously very, very impressed by the beautiful nature of the final checkmate. Instead of knight a6, I think objectively the best move for black is the move bishop to a6, but still after knight c7 check and knight takes a6, black cannot take back as the rook on a8 is hanging, and black's king is still in huge danger here, with the white's bishop on d6 just being extremely powerful. So this was, I think, basically Anderssen's most famous game, along with the next one. This next game against Jean Dufresne is also quite fantastic, but I should say this one is slightly flawed. We picked things up from the key position here. This actually came from an Evans gambit, and for the most part, black was defending well, but at this point I think white just had a fantastic position, and any kind of simple continuation would have given white just an enormous advantage here. For example, rook a d1, I think white just has a fantastic position. The threat is to go knight to g3 and start chasing down black's queen. For example, after castles, knight g3, queen h6, white can play bishop c1, and black's queen just ends up getting chased around. Knight g5 comes in, h7 pawn is hanging, the queen can swing over to h4, and basically black's king is in terrible shape. But instead Anderssen goes for a very beautiful move, knight f6 check, which is a fantastic sacrifice, but objectively flawed. Black was forced to take, e takes f6, and now Dufresne finds the absolute best defensive move, rook to g8. Now back then the level of defense wasn't so great, but rook g8 is a fantastic find. Instead of trying to defend the knight on e7, black instead is looking for counterplay and is setting up ideas based on the pressure against the g2 pawn, the bishop x-raying on the diagonal as well, and black's queen being nicely placed. So Anderssen continues with rook a d1. He's just trying to develop his pieces and playing for the initiative. He was very good at just playing positions with a piece down, but always going for the attack and going for checkmate. And here black makes a decisive mistake with queen takes f3. I mean, a very natural move, grabbing a second piece, but this move simply loses on the spot to a really beautiful combination. Instead, I found a couple of moves that would have held on for black. I believe the simplest defense here was the move queen to h3. Which is a very interesting move, threatening the same checkmate on g2, but the queen on h3 covers this important d7 square, which makes white's combination that he played in the game not work here. Instead, white would have to play a move like bishop f1, defending against the mate, and then after a move like queen to f5, according to Stockfish, black is holding on, but obviously the position is still incredibly complicated. Another very fancy computer defense that I found was this move bishop to d4. The point being that after c takes d4, black has now blocked off the d-file, again making the combination that white played in the game not work. And here after queen takes f3, things are again super messy, but objectively supposedly leading to a perpetual. For example, after bishop e4, rook takes g2 check, king h1, black has nothing better than rook takes h2, and queen takes f2 check, playing for perpetual with a draw. Instead of all this, black played the move queen takes f3, which looks very natural, grabbing a piece, threatening checkmate. but this ends up losing concretely after the start of a very, very nice combination. White goes rook takes e7, and black takes the rook, knight takes e7. Objectively, king d8 was a better defense, but white would be winning here anyway after a very nice move, rook takes d7, and leading to a mating attack. I'll get back to this one. First, I want to show the key point of the combination. After knight takes e7, white goes ahead and sacrifices the queen in the flashiest way possible with queen takes d7 check. Really, really magnificent combination. The point is, after king takes d7, bishop f5, double check, black's king is getting mated. All of white's pieces are under attack, but of course it's a double check, so black cannot capture any of these pieces, has to move the king. After king c6, bishop d7 is made on the board, and after king e8, black also got mated with bishop d7 check, and the second bishop coming to e7. And this final position is just magnificent. I think there's another reason why these games are so well known to chess history is that the final positions are just so aesthetic. Black has so much extra material, extra queen and rook is about to mate white's king in so many different ways, but of course none of that matters because white's pieces have delivered checkmate first. So this was Anderssen's beautiful point, and you can see why this entire combination hinged on this detail that white has this queen takes d7 resource. That's why if black's queen was on h3, this entire combination would not be working and white wouldn't be able to go for this. Instead, a better defense, apart from knight takes e7, was for black to play king to d8, but here white wins in similar fashion after rook takes d7 check. The rook cannot be captured in view of similar mates with bishop f5, and after king to c8, white has a very, very nice finish anyway with a rook to d8 check, simply insisting that black accepts the rook. Once again, bishop f5 is in the air, and after king takes d8, for example, bishop f5 check, the rook on d1 is defended, queen takes d1, white is winning. In case of rook takes d8, the rook is pulled away from the g-file, so white can simply go g takes f3 when black's queen has a winning position. And after knight takes d8, once again white wins with the spectacular queen d7 check, bringing the king out into the open and leading to mate on d7. So this game has been nicknamed the evergreen game, basically meaning that it's always going to be quite beautiful and magnificent, and yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. And the final game I wanted to show for this video is a game Anderssen played with black against Jakob Rosales. And this game took place in 1863, and we're picking up from what I believe is the critical position in the game. This again came from King's Gambit, where white just played this move, bishop to b5 check. Now at the time, the main move according to theory was the move king f8, which Anderssen had actually played with black before, and actually faced once with white as well. But in this game, he comes up with an opening improvement, and that is the move c6. And this to me was quite impressive because obviously back then there was no such thing as computers, let alone chess computers. But it clearly shows that Anderssen was analyzing his games, and he finds a very, very strong improvement over his previous play that now holds up to theoretical scrutiny. So the point of this move is, of course, to counterattack white's bishop and to offer some material in exchange for the initiative, as we've seen throughout the series and throughout the Romantic era. So white took on c6, b takes c6, and white accepts the material with knight takes c6, black takes on c6, bishop takes c6 check, king to f8, and now white accepts this sacrificed rook on a8. White doesn't have to take, but doesn't really have anything better, as black's initiative is going to be coming no matter what. And after bishop takes a8, we can see the point of black's play with this move knight to g3. Hitting white's rook, but more importantly, starting to create a mating net around white's king, preventing white's king from castling and getting out of danger. And yeah, this knight on g3 just gives black absolutely tremendous compensation for the rook. White's development is virtually non-existent, and the king is just not going to be able to get out of the center alive. White played rook h2, kind of a naive move trying to save the rook, but of course this rook on h2 is basically worthless. And Anderssen simply continues here with his development, bishop f5. Bishop d5 was played, and king g7. Very slow but fantastic move. Black is simply preparing to bring in the rook with rook to e8. White continues developing, knight c3, rook e8 check, king f2, queen b6, setting up all kinds of ideas along the diagonal and increasing the pressure. White tried knight a4, queen a6, back to c3, and here black starts a fantastic combination once again with the move bishop to e5. Very, very pretty move. The point after d takes e5 is that this would be met with queen to b6 check, and white's king is getting mated, has to go back to e1, where after queen g1 check, king d2, and queen e3. Once again, we have a nice mate on the board. Instead, white played the move a4, trying to block off black's queen with a move like knight b5 next, but this runs into Anderssen's brilliant mating combination once again. He finds a very, very stunning queen sacrifice here with queen f1 check. And then after queen takes f1, bishop takes d4, check. White's king is just completely stuck here. The queen was, of course, distracted from defending the d4 pawn. White had to play bishop to e3, and now not bishop takes e3 check, but instead rook takes e3, which is a lot stronger and threatening rook to e2, double check and mate, and white's king is just totally boxed in. I always love games like this where we have some fantastic sacrifices leading to a position where the king is getting mated not with checks but actually with quiet moves. White has a move here to do anything they want but is still getting mated anyway. In the game, white tried king to g1, but after rook to e1, this turns out to be mate on the board. The bishop is giving check and the queen is pinned, so it's not possible to block with queen f2, and of course the king is also out of squares. So as you can see, Anderssen really had some tremendous victories, and he was, I think, rightly regarded as one of the best, if not the best player in the world around 1850, 1851, and in those years. He ended up losing a match to Morphy several years later, who was then considered the unofficial best player in the world. And Anderssen also lost a very tight match with the future world champion, Steinitz, a couple of decades before Steinitz became the official world champion. But despite these losses, of course, his games have made just a tremendous impression on many of the world's best players, and his attacking influence was certainly felt for many, many years. With that, I'll be wrapping up the video here. Once again, if you want to check out any of the games covered in this series, as well as some bonus games, do make sure to check out the link to the study in the description below, and hopefully I'll catch you guys in future videos. Take care.